So on the workbench today we've got this Hughes and Kettner Deluxe 40. The complaint the customer has is it's had a service by another technician, and according to the customer, since its service, the standby switch isn't doing as it should, as in when the amp is on standby, it's still very much audible through the speaker. When it's set to play, it's full power as it should be, but when in standby, not quite full power, but still not in standby also. So I've had a bit of a initial look at this, and I've found straight away that the standby switch isn't conventionally switching the B+ high voltage to the output section as it would conventionally. It's instead going through a very complex circuit, which is, I think they call it the tube status monitor, or the TSC. There's a little bit of information about it on the back panel on the bottom. So the tube status monitor, and then they're referring to TSC, is automatically indicating the status of the tubes. So what it seems to be is a electronically self-biasing and self-adjusting system to keep the tubes set correctly. And if one of the tubes fails, it will disconnect that tube and it won't stop you from playing. It'll just reduce the output if it needs to. So I've confirmed that the standby switch functions mechanically and electrically. It is, opening and closing as it should. So past that point, I had to do a bit of research, and I've been lucky enough to find the Meister 36 schematic. This is the 40, but I'm sure there won't be that much differences between the two. And so jumping straight into the output section, these are 4 output tubes. V5, 4, 6 and 7. So 4, 5, 6 and 7. So straight away you can see that they're using a MOSFET on the cathodes of each tube. 1, 2, 3, 4 MOSFETs. And for example, tube 4 and 7, these MOSFET gates are tied together before going through this driver transistor, and that comes out of the TSC system, pin 11 for example, off tube 2 and 3, which presumably is these 2 tubes. So I've gone ahead and had a look. Actually, something quite important to mention is on the back of this amp is your TSC LED readout here. So the idea behind this is that you can insert your guitar pick into here and it will give you an idea of how the tubes are biased. However, when on standby, these LEDs, I think, should all illuminate initially. On this one, only the first 3 illuminate, the 4th one is out. And as I said, in conjunction with the actual fault that we've got, meaning the standby switch won't actually put the amp into standby, I'm suspecting something with this tube here, the 4th tube. So that brings me to looking at these MOSFETs. The fact that these MOSFETs are tied together would indicate that, well, if this tube here is functioning as it should, if the LED readout is anything to go off, then surely the driver circuit, and whether this is high or low or whatever it needs to be, surely that's all correct, and the issue must be localized with just MOSFET Q24. So let me flip the amp over and I'll show you where Q24 is. So Q24 is right about there, sandwiched between all these circuit boards. I have done some tests with my meter on diode mode, and I've done a bit of a comparative test between all 4 MOSFETs, and sure enough, Q24 is reading differently to the other 3. It's not quite as short, but it is conducting, even though it's in its off state, which would indicate why this amp isn't able to go into standby if this tube is always conducting. Not only if this MOSFET has failed to some degree, and this tube isn't able to go into standby, I'm sure that it won't be able to be biased correctly either. So this smart system here seems to have failed. So I've got a new MOSFET on its way, so I'll do a part 2 of pulling all of this apart, which I'm not looking forward to, and pulling this out, testing it out of circuit before replacing it if it seems to be the problem. Once we get down to it, we'll know a bit more. And so yeah, I'll come back with a part 2 and we'll see if this MOSFET is the one and only culprit in this amp. Hopefully by replacing that MOSFET we'll get a more consistent readout with these LEDs across all 4 output tubes. And I should also add that I've had these tubes out and tested on the triplet tube checker, and they're all measuring very well. Aside from that, the amp is functioning just fine. So yeah, watch this space. We'll be back for another video. Cheers.